Hello and welcome to the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Tyler, and folks, we've got some exciting news to talk about with our Baltimore Orioles. They have signed a prospect to a big extension, something we've been asking them to do for a long, long time now, and it is Samuel Basallo that gets the deal. We'll go through the extension details in just a minute, but I think first I want to talk about just the fact that the Orioles have made one of these extensions happen since Mike Elias came out as the Orioles GM years ago, took over from the Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette years. The whole plan was to build that pipeline, to bring your prospects up, and to kind of be a self-fulfilling, self-reliant franchise. Obviously, supplement here and there with other players, but in general, you are supplying your own talent, and that's how you build a successful core to win championships. And part of that was always logically going to be signing those players two extensions because the idea is you sign those players early. You basically take a gamble, a measured, estimated gamble to say, let's buy out some years. Let's give them a little bit more money on the front end than they would have gotten, save us some money on the back end. We extend our window by a year, 2, 3 years by getting these guys, we're buying out free agency for cheaper than what their market value will be at that point. That allows us to compete for longer, allows us to keep the core together longer, and it makes everything more economical in that way. Of course, you're probably not always going to come out on top on that. We can talk about some examples of that around the league here in just a second, but it's been something that folks have wanted for a long time. They wanted extensions for Rutschman, they wanted extensions for Henderson, Westberg, Holiday now, Mayo, Rodriguez. It hasn't happened with any of them until Samuel Basallo joins the Orioles, and within a week of his call up, gets an 8-year contract extension. Again, we'll get into the details in just a minute. And I think it is relevant. And again, I'll talk about this. Basallo is a special case because I think he's a mix of several different elements that allow a player to be open to an extension, to enable a team to get an extension done. And we'll talk about why Basallo stands out compared to some of those other guys that have not signed extensions yet in just a minute. But first, let's go through the details of the contract. So it is an 8-year contract worth $67 million. However, there are incentives as well as a team option for a ninth year that all of that together can rise the overall value of the contract to $88.5 million over 9 years. Buys out 2 years of free agency, could be a third with that team option that if Basallo's hitting really well, playing up to his potential, or at least close to it, those are going to buy that ninth year. The AAV on it is $9.83 million. So under $10 million AAV, again, that's giving him more money on the early part of his career where he's going to make the league minimum for 26, 27, 28. Instead, he's going to get a bump on that. But then you think about $10 million for a 27-year-old Samuel Basallo, who, right now it's all about potential. We don't know what he's going to turn into, but the potential right now is to be one of the top hitters in Major League Baseball. We got to see what Basallo does. He's going to play a lot of catcher here down the stretch. We know that with Rutschman on the IL. Potentially, Rutschman will be out for the rest of the season with an oblique. I'm not sure what the point of rushing him back at this point would be, and obliques tend to linger. So, best guess, Basallo's your catcher for the rest of the year. Maybe Alex Jackson steps in a little bit here and there, obviously. Maybe Gary Sanchez comes back. That if you forget, he's still on the team technically, just on the IL. Maybe he comes back and plays some catcher, but we're going to get a chance to see Basallo behind the plate. But really, he just needs to be adequate, passable behind the plate. It's about his bat, honestly. But however, it is relevant to say some of the incentives in the contract pertain to catching games, not just playing first base. So to get the maximum $88.5 million, he will have to catch some games. And of course, if he's hitting well by that point, then maybe he's going to get even a bigger contract from somebody else when he's, I think 29 years old at that point. But again, 29, a lot of these players, you want to get those, age 24 to 28 seasons. That's like the prime of careers anymore. It's not 29, 30, 31. That's like an old school way of thinking about it is like 29, 30, 31's prime. That's really not. That's when the players start to go downhill a little bit. Obviously, every player is different, but I think when you're buying a catcher, a guy that's getting to the big leagues now, theoretically, the Orioles are going to be getting his prime years, and they're going to be getting them for, yes, a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but in terms of baseball pricing, very affordable at under a $10 million AAV. Speaking about this from the player's perspective, of course, if he does play as well as he possibly can, Basallo is leaving money on the table here. There's no question about it. The most financially beneficial thing for him to do if he plays as well as he potentially could be is to not sign an extension, to get the maximum out of arbitration that he can, and to become a free agent as soon as possible so he can go in the open market and get as much money from whatever team wants to sign him, whether that's the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks, whomever. Instead, he is choosing to take like the security of a guaranteed contract right now over the potential to make much more money down the road. Um, Look, speaking as somebody who does not have millions of dollars, this is obviously a beneficial deal for Basallo as well, though, because now there's no worry. He's got generational wealth now. You know, just the salary alone over 9 years is going to be $88.5 million. If he plays well, you obviously you're likely gonna see him get uh, sponsorship deals either locally, nationally, wherever that can make him much more than that. So Samuel Basallo, with the stroke of a pen and obviously a lot of hard work that came from the years before that, now has generational wealth, which is fantastic for him. Doesn't mean there's not a lack of risk on his part. Like I said, he's leaving money on the table potentially. But congratulations to him. Congratulations to the Orioles for getting it done. Now, talking about the value of the contract, MLB Trade Rumors did a nice job of wrapping things up. If you go to their website and just click through the Orioles links, it'll be the first one, I'm sure, unless something else interesting happens before you listen to this episode. But if you go over there, go to the Orioles tab of MLB Trade Rumors, read through their Orioles extension of Samuel Basallo post, and it kind of lays all this out. But I'll try to explain it here in the episode, obviously. Basallo's deal, I think, pretty much falls in line with a lot of these other deals that are of similar players at these parts of their career. Obviously, the numbers are different. They change based on, perceived ceiling, age, things like that. But some of the more recent deals that have happened in this sort of category, Roman Anthony with the Boston Red Sox signed for $130 million over 8 years. Christian Campbell with the Red Sox signed for $60 million over 8 years. And Jackson Chourio with the Brewers signed for $82 million over 8 years. Chourio's deal has some bigger incentives at the back. It's two club options for years 9 and 10 at $25 million each. So pretty beefy potential club options there that it doesn't sound like, but I don't know what if they said what Basallo's club option in 2034 would be, but I guess because it goes from 67 million to 88.5 million, it would be a $21.5 million extension, but that doesn't necessarily tell me, what part of the original 67 million over the first 8 years is salary versus incentives and things like that. But I guess we could think about if that option gets picked up, it's basically a $21.5 million extension or club option in 2034. So much less than the 25 million that Chourio it could get for his years 9 and 10. If Chourio was I think, slightly higher regarded prospect than Basallo, I think Chourio was in the conversation for number one in the entire sport. Basallo never quite got there for most places. I think he was a top 10 prospect. So maybe that makes the difference of a couple $1 million. Potentially also the position. Catchers wear down. Will he be a catcher? Will he be a first baseman? Versus Chourio is an outfielder, going to be an outfielder, things like that. So as I said, not much of a surprise with the Basallo numbers. I think they line up somewhat well with a lot of these other players. He is a well-regarded prospect. He is young. He is talented. He is already showing well at the major league level. So, blah, 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 blah. So now that we know the details of the contract, at least the details we understand at the moment, and we also know some of the other players that have been signed at similar points in their career recently, I think we should talk about why Basallo is the Oriole to get this deal and not some of the other names we talked about earlier. Because teams have to pick and choose this, right? I mean, and I say teams have to pick and choose. I think in a team's from a team's perspective, they would sign a whole bunch of their young players early for well below market rate and make off like bandits. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but these players, rather, I guess, are selectively given and accepting of these contracts for a number of reasons that I think we need to discuss. But let's lay out, some of the other potential candidates that people have talked about with the Orioles over the years. You've got Gunnar Henderson, obviously, you know, became one of, if not the top prospect in all of baseball, has shown MVP level performance at the major league level just last year, has been really, really good this year. Not quite at MVP level, but All-star caliber, of course, didn't make the All-Star team, but you get what I'm saying. Kind of an elite baseball player. Jackson Holliday was the top prospect in baseball, comes from a baseball family, has not quite gotten to the Henderson level yet, but he is young. He's still figuring it out. There's been growth obviously this year, but no extension done there. Jordan Westburg, never quite a absolute top prospect, but a top 100 type, has already been an all-star. A ton of, pedigree there that you expect he's going to be a really good player for a long time. Grayson Rodriguez was a top pitching prospect. Pitcher, always a little bit tougher to get those deals done because the health concerns, and with Rodriguez in particular, that has cropped up time and time again. Right now, obviously, doesn't feel like a guy that's going to get an extension. He hasn't pitched in over a year, but I think people have thought about him in the past because he was a young top prospect. Adley Rutschman, obviously, number one overall pick, was the top catching prospect, was the top prospect in all of baseball, was really, really good for the first 2, 3 years of his career. Has hit some injury stuff this last year and a half or year, I guess. Especially this year, it's been really, really problematic. Hasn't gotten done. Kobe Mayo went from a fifth round pick to one of the top prospects in baseball. One of the top power prospects for sure. Has been better for the Orioles this year, has played a little bit more this year. A lot of potential there, but I think still a ton of question marks for him. And then I think recently Dylan Beavers has really popped up this year in particular. Now is kind of on the fringes of a top 100 prospect on both ESPN and Baseball America. We'll see if Pipeline revamps things this offseason and gets him up there. Well, has shown really well in his first taste of the majors, but I don't think prior to this year was really thought of as a guy that you're going to give an extension to, because he wasn't really quite at the level of some of these other guys. But I think his pop-upness recently warrants him to be in this conversation that I'm having, at least. So none of those guys have gotten contracts done, some of them with arguably more impressive prospect resumes than Samuel Basallo. So why did Basallo in particular get the deal? I think it's a combination of factors that I kind of alluded to earlier. I think first, we need to talk about age. I think age is the most important element of this. Basallo is young. He's 21 years old, just turned 21 a week ago, right before he got promoted. So, young player, check there. Not the only young player to be called up. We know Gunnar was young, Holiday was young. Some of these other guys a little farther along. Rutschman was a college draftee, Beavers was a college draftee, Westburg a college. Mayo was a high school pick, but took a little bit longer in the minors, stumbled a little bit initially. So some of those things, and then Rodriguez being a pitcher, I think kind of takes him out. So let's talk about position as well, because I think position is relevant to this as well. Being a catcher, being a shortstop, being a center fielder, I think those are the positions these teams want to lock up when possible. Or, a premium bat, a Ronald Acuna type, a Julio Rodriguez type. I think those as well. Position, regardless of position, I think teams kind of view those as like the spots you really want to shore up. But right field, becomes one of the most premium hitting positions in the league anymore. I think if you can get a guy that you think is a top level premium right field bat for the next 10 years, you try to sign him up as well. Henderson, obviously shortstop, but it hasn't happened for some reasons we'll get into here in a second. Holiday came up as a shortstop, still hasn't gotten done for reasons we'll talk about in a second. Westburg, I don't think they ever totally viewed him as a shortstop long-term in the bigs, more of a third baseman. Good third baseman, but maybe that takes him off the list. Mayo, again, he was an infielder, was a left side infielder, now over to first base. I think there was always some questions about that. Kind of takes him out of the mix. Beavers, a right fielder. Is he an absolute top premium bat right fielder? We're not so sure about that. The number's been really good in AAA, but probably, again, in addition to the age stuff, him being older, a college draft pick, maybe that takes him out as well. Rutschman, a catcher, but again, college catcher, not a high school catcher. Rodriguez, a pitcher. So I think right now, if you talk about age and position, that combination, it's Basallo, it's Henderson, it's Holiday. Maybe Mayo, you could argue, but Mayo, it sounds like he's a first baseman now. So, and if they ever thought maybe he's going to be a first baseman, maybe he's a right fielder and that brings him back into the conversation. But right now he's playing first base a lot, not playing right field. So that tells me Orioles say, hey, he's a first baseman. So now it's just Henderson, Holiday, Basallo as guys you're going to give those extensions to. Personal background, I think, has a lot to do with this. Is not simply to say, does this guy come from money, but does this guy come from a comfortable background where there's no need to go get this type of cash. I don't know enough about all of these players to speak to that. I don't know what kind of money Basallo comes from in the Dominican Republic. Who knows? Same with Gunner in Alabama. I don't really know what background he comes from, so I think I would kind of put those two semi-similar together in that at the very least, I know that they don't come from Jackson Holliday's background of a former Major League Baseball player, a really good Major League Baseball player, and Matt Holliday being his dad. You see the videos of him in the offseason at basically a compound at their house, a baseball hitting compound. I mean, again, I don't know Henderson's background. I don't know Basallo's personal background. Doesn't sound like those two come from that type of background where their father made millions and millions of dollars playing the exact sport that they're playing now to be able to support them to say, hey, man, go play the game. Obviously, make your money. Go to a team you want to, sign with the team you want to be with long term, but don't feel the need to sign whatever contract you can get because you have a safety net here that's pretty cushy. That you already were a first round draft pick. You already got a couple $1 million in the bank from that. You've made your own money, but at the same time, you've got this background that you don't have to support your family for generations. You just have to support you, and otherwise, I got you. I'm not explaining the absolute best way, but I think I'm conveying what I mean there. Whereas to say, Holiday has a different safety net than Henderson or Basallo would have prior to, Basallo getting this contract. Obviously, Gunner got a decent signing bonus out of high school and has now made some money as a Major League Baseball player in addition to endorsement deals and things like that. I think at this point, these guys are in a really good spot, but you understand what I'm saying prior to that and maybe prior to getting their footing in Major League Baseball a little bit. And then, of course, the final point is the agent. Let's talk about the agent a little bit. I think this is totally a relevant point that people are going to point to. I looked at spottrack.com for this, but there's also other sources because I think Westberg's agent actually isn't on here. But Gunnar Henderson, his agent is Scott Boras. Jackson Holliday, his agent, if I can find it, I think it says it on here, is Scott Boras. Yeah, Scott Boras. Jordan Westberg is Boras, and Grayson Rodriguez is Boras as well. Scott Boras does a really good job for his clients in general. He gets these guys a lot of money. He was Juan Soto's agent. He got the Yankees and the Mets into a bidding war to get Juan Soto the most money ever. Of course, Juan Soto also, hitting free agency as a young player with a really impressive background is worthwhile as well. Obviously been a really, really good player. It's not just Boras getting him all this money for no reason. He earned it. But Boras has that reputation of we're not going to sign an extension early. We're going to go to free agency. And hey, your team that my player played for 6, 7 years, you're in the conversation. You're worthy of consideration at the table, but we're going to go to the guy that pays us the most money, even if it's by a penny. That is where we're going. And I'll take my players' concerns and I can play the teams against each other to push the decision towards the team my player wants to go to. But ultimately, we're going to who signs the checks, the biggest check. That is what Scott Boras does. Samuel Basallo is not represented by Scott Boras. I think CAA Sports is his representation. And they have a number of different agents there. I don't know who his in particular is. I'm sure, on a bigger contract like this, a lot of people get involved, but he's not a Boras client. And that's relevant to this as well. So what does this mean for the Orioles and, some players that I think are directly impacted by this? The first thing I want to address is I've seen people saying, how are other players in the Orioles going to feel about this? A guy coming up just a week gets an extension while these other guys have been grinding, have more of a proven record at the major league level. They haven't gotten this extension. To that, I kind of refer you back to the points I just mentioned, which is these guys have agents. I can assure you, based on comments made by Boras, and I think even Elias, maybe Elias hasn't said this, but I know Boras has, basically saying that his clients that are with the Orioles have been positive about the organization. They want to keep a winning environment. They want to stick with the Orioles, of course, all the same, yada, yada, yada. But has also said that there's been discussions about extensions. I think in particular with Henderson and maybe Holiday. Those conversations have taken place. The signing hasn't happened. And why hasn't the signing happened? Well, look, it takes two to tango. The Orioles haven't met the asking price. And the player and the agent haven't, I guess, gotten down to a point where the Orioles would say yes to a deal. And that just is the reality. I think Boras probably keeps a higher asking price, relative to the player's production than most teams would be willing to meet prior to free agency. That doesn't feel like a crazy thing. So there'd be no real reason for a player to be jealous because I think a guy like Gunnar Henderson could go to Mike Elias right now and say, all right, I want double what Samuel Basallo signed for. And I'm not so sure that Elias wouldn't be like, yeah, sure, let's get it done, man. You've already finished top whatever 5 in the MVP voting. You're our best player again this year. We would love to keep you here until you're 32 years old. Let's get a 10-year deal done today or an 8-year deal done today for whatever, 100 or $200 million, something. I think they would get it done. That's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. It's not because Gunner's a bad guy. It's not because Boris is a bad guy. It's not because Elias is a bad guy. It's just the reality of the relationship between player, agent, and organization. So I think any thought of other players being jealous from that perspective needs to, go away. I think if a player is jealous that a non-elite player like that is maybe jealous of Basayo getting a contract, well, look, man, that's just the nature of the business. The team has expectations for him. He's the age to get this kind of a deal, and it's how things go. Sorry, like that's just reality. It's like any other organization outside of sports. There's people I work with that I'm sure I'm jealous of the salary they're making, but they're getting it because they've maybe accomplished some things, or have a resume that I don't have, and that's just the reality of it. I don't think that should negatively impact the Orioles, the player, or anything else. I think what's a more interesting question is how does this impact Adley Rutschman and his future with the Baltimore Orioles? Um, he's under team control for 2026 and 2027. I think the Orioles probably feel more confident with him behind the plate than Basallo day to day defensively. I think, I don't know enough about Basallo yet to make one call one way or the other, but I could understand that perspective. Rutschman has a certain or a reputation behind the plate, although the numbers don't always bear that out. But he's got a reputation back there. Basallo has his own reputation of not being a great defensive catcher, but we need to see more of that. I remember when Matt Wieters was coming up, the scouting reports weren't always super glowing of his defensive work. He was more of a bat first prospect. Then he came out and it seemed like he threw all the runners out that he saw, got a couple Gold Gloves, and sort of spun that whole narrative on its head. So maybe Basallo's got that in his locker. I don't know, but need to see some more of that before I can kind of make a distinction on that one way or the other. But look, there's no reason that the Orioles can't have both Basallo and Adley Rutschman on the team in 2026. Now, if a trade comes up for Rutschman and the Orioles like the offer, sure, I guess that could happen if they feel confident enough in Basallo behind the plate to be your guy every single day. But that doesn't feel very Mike Elias-y to me. It feels more, it just doesn't feel like something he would do. What I would expect him to do is to have both of them, and you reduce um the work rate on both of them day to day by having them both on the roster. You can have Basallo catch a day, have Rutschman catch a day, other one goes to DH or first base or whatever. Now that has down funnel impacts because obviously they have first baseman on the roster right now in Kobe Mayo and Ryan Mountcastle. To me, that feels like Mountcastle could be on the trading block this offseason, which I think felt likely anyway. As long as he hits well this off or down the stretch here, um, I think Mountcastle's on the trading block, and he feels like the exact kind of a guy that you can trade for a middle relief piece. And the Orioles need middle relievers really bad. They need to rebuild the entire bullpen this offseason. We now know Felix Bautista's out for basically the entire year. Maybe he comes back for September next year. We'll see. The Orioles have a lot of work to do in the bullpen. And a guy like Mountcastle, who's got, I think, 1 or 2 more years of team control and seems to be a good clubhouse guy, power potential, feels like a guy you can trade for a middle reliever. You're not going to get, your future closer necessarily, I wouldn't expect, but feels like that kind of a guy. So there's certainly down funnel stuff. But Rutschman, what do you trade Rutschman for right now? He's coming off basically 12 months of underperformance and injury concerns because he's been injured multiple times this year. He was terrible in the second half last year, although the team, claims there was no injury stuff. But to see his performance fall off a cliff post All-Star break makes you think something happened there. So what do you trade that guy for who, yes, has talent and has a background of success, but more recently has really struggled? I'm not so sure that feels like something the Orioles are going to do when you could potentially benefit from his ceiling and win a lot of games. And it's not like, I can't see a team offering what the Orioles need for Adley Rutschman. The Orioles need another frontline starter. They need bullpen, but I'm not so sure the Orioles are going to match up with that to get bullpen pieces for Rutschman. And the Orioles need, I think, a veteran bat in the lineup. And that's kind of what Rutschman is becoming. Now, he obviously doesn't have the postseason success, and that's something the Orioles need as well. So maybe there's some sort of match there, but it doesn't feel like a match to make the Orioles better, which is what the Orioles are going to want for 2026 and 2027. And yes, you could trade him for prospects, but the Orioles farm system is in kind of a good spot right now. They just spent July trading away players to kind of beef up the back of the farm system, and they had a humongous draft class that already looks pretty good down in Delmarva. Of course, Delmarva is a long way from Baltimore, but Aloy, Irish, Bodine, um, they all look pretty good so far. So I'm not so sure it makes a lot of sense. I would love to see the Orioles just beef things up, man. You know Rutschman's potential, keep him. Basallo, let him catch, but protect him. Don't make him catch every single day. Let him play some first base. Let him play some DH. This guy's a valuable commodity now. You can't just, let his knees go because you want him to play every single day. Let him play first base. Let him play DH. Who cares? Keep Mayo in the lineup. Let Mayo play first base. Maybe get Mayo out in right field. Let him DH. Like there's mixes and matches you can do to maximize the team. And while I love Ryan Mountcastle as a guy, is a fan favorite for sure. We kind of know what he is at this point. He's a guy that he's never going to quite hit as well as you want him to. And at first base, you need to be, 10, 15, 20% above league average to be a valuable first baseman. The defense is really great and solid, but I just don't know that the value is there. So for me, it's Mountcastle likely goes. Mayo plays first. Basallo plays first and catcher. Rutschman plays catcher and DH, and you make it work that way. So for me, this is a really exciting development. I won't belabor the point anymore and go deeper into it. Really exciting development for the Orioles, something they needed to do for a long time with one of their players. And the fact that it's Basallo makes a lot of sense just given age, um, position, potential upside, and agency that no other prospect for the Orioles has matched yet. And look, this is a reality of it. A lot of these foreign born players are a little bit more open to these sorts of deals because they come from backgrounds that aren't as cushy and supportive and they have families that love them for sure, but they don't always have families that have the money to support them to do X, Y, and Z. Getting into a major league or a professional sports organization can be a real windfall for them. And then to get this earlier in your career, you can say, look, I can lock in $80 million now, or I can risk it, get hurt, and then make, just what I made in salary for a couple of years. I think these types of players have this more openness to it that not always the American players that get a big signing bonus. I mean, Posada got $1.3 million from the Orioles to sign from the Dominican. So it's not like he's poor anymore at this point. But these players that, that are American, that go through, the perfect game system or whatever. Their parents have enough money to have them on a travel ball team, to go on the circuit, to go to a private school, to get lessons, to get all the equipment, to get yada yada yada. Then you go in the first round, you get a $5 million signing bonus. There's a lot of things there that some of these other players don't necessarily have that make them, more open to these deals that the American players that then get Boris as an agent. It's a combination that kind of leads you to say, like, you're not going to get these long-term extensions. And it's unfortunate because it's a part of modern baseball that um, has kind of worn away the like foreverness of a player. These players that stick with their teams for a decade or more. A lot of times it's a player signs, gets drafted somewhere, plays there 6 years, goes to free agency, gets a 3-year deal somewhere, goes to free agency, gets a 2-year deal somewhere, and you have like 4, 5, 6 teams on your resume, which is great, and you made as much money as you could. But I don't know that any one organization views you as like their guy. Um, Manny Machado is the rare guy that was in Baltimore. I think had his best years in Baltimore, has gone to San Diego, been really good for them, is likely on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and is probably going to go in the Hall of Fame as a Padre, I would imagine, unless he somehow gets back on the market and resigns with the Orioles and then does a lot of good things late in his career. I don't see that going to happen. But a lot of these players, I think in the modern era, they play for 5, 6 teams, 4 or 5 teams, have really good careers. They compile some numbers. What's that Hall of Fame plaque going to read? Juan Soto is a really good example of that. Really good with the Nationals, Probably if he goes to the Hall of Fame will be a Met though, because he's going to be there for 15 years, or maybe he'll opt out and then go somewhere else. Um, Basallo has a chance to be an all-time Oriole now. If he lives up to his potential, he's going to play 9 seasons here potentially, put up really big numbers, and then he, maybe goes somewhere else as a 30-year-old. The back half of his career maybe doesn't put up as good of numbers, but is always going to be remembered. Samuel Basallo, the Baltimore Oriole. If he goes to the Hall of Fame, it'll be as a Baltimore Oriole. Like those things mean something. You can buy that jersey and not worry about it being wrong 2 years from now, or not, him not being on the team anymore in 2 years. That's valuable to a fan base. That's valuable to an organization. It gives you a face of the organization. Is Basallo going to become like the Oriole versus, Henderson or Holiday or Rutschman? If he's the guy getting the contract and putting up the numbers, like that's how those things happen. Um, so it's exciting. A lot of mixed feelings of sure the player's maybe getting underpaid, but he's, getting insurance for his life and all those kinds of things. But I think my overall reaction is just excitement that the Orioles finally did one of these. They were falling behind a little bit. We see the Braves, the Rays, the Red Sox, the Yankees even do these. It's exciting to see the Orioles pull off one of these contracts. Um, so yeah, exciting for us as Orioles fans, exciting for Basallo, and hopefully we now get to see the best stuff. Now he just really put up numbers and performs for the team. So we'll see. But yeah, what do you guys think about this? Leave a comment on the YouTube or on Spotify or on social media at The Warehouse Pod on Blue Sky. And you can even email the show, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of this move. Are you excited about the Basallo extension? Who's the next one you want to see extended, if anybody? And yeah, just let us know what you think. But that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Again, my name is Tyler, and this has been The Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. And we'll talk to you next time. See you.